just to be fair, it doesn't have to be Android necessarily, but I wanted to share a few things with you about why you might like mobile development in general. So, why mobile? Why might you like working in mobile? Mobile affects how we do things. You know, like, I think it's almost been 10 years. I think this year is actually going to be the 10th anniversary of both the launch of the iPhone as well as the release of Android. And in the last 10 years, it's amazing, you know, the smartphone revolution, the mobile revolution. How has mobile changed our lives, how we do things and how we affect things? And I think in a very broad way, you know, that is something that mobile can provide you. If you get lucky or if you kind of work on the right project, you have the ability to really affect how we as like a people, as we as society do things. And you know, there's some really obvious examples of things in the last 10 years that have changed like the way we do things, the way we live, the way we work. So kind of obvious things like Lyft and other kind of the sharing economy kind of apps, changing how we travel, how we, you know, like rent places to stay, like find cars to like drive us around. Twitter, obviously, social media has become huge in the last 10 years, for good or for bad, whatever kind of like ideology, I guess, that you kind of believe in. Twitter has been able to connect people in ways and change how we interact with ourselves and the world around us. And kind of on a lighter note, you know, things like Instagram, you know, like another big thing with the mobile revolution is how we take pictures, how we experience and share our lives with other people. All of these things have come about because of this new, you know, mobile era that we're living in. So another thing, just like, you know, simple things like point of service. So like things like Square and SumUp, you know, changing ways that small businesses, you know, pay and interact with their customers. This is like an app, I don't know if it's actually here in Europe, but like there's a lot of mobile apps that are trying to change like how we bank and how we trade stocks. Robinhood's a really beautiful app that is trying to make stock trading more accessible by making both the trading free and the experience more beautiful. And then there's other initiatives like OffGrid Electric. This is actually a company that a friend of mine works at. This is Denise Davis. She actually went to my university. She's from kind of like the same state that I'm in. And OffGrid Electric is a company that's trying to bring clean solar energy to places that are off the grid. You know, maybe like you know, villages or towns or just places where you can't get normal electrical infrastructure. And their whole idea is to bring clean solar energy. And in the process of doing that, you know, they have people going out into kind of remote areas, you know, places where you probably need a Jeep or something to go. And part of kind of making this workforce work effectively and to get solar energy to these places, they actually have an app. And this is something that Denise works on. She works on this Android app that does lots of different things. It helps coordinate the workforce. It actually helps with sales and communications. And it actually helps with diagnostics. They use near-field communication to actually communicate with the solar utility boxes and do diagnostics on it. So, you know, like, I feel like, I remember reading, there's this magazine, I think it was like CNN or something in the US, and 2 months ago they had this article about the best jobs. And the #1 job was mobile app developer. And they had kind of like different aspects of the job, like pay and like living situation. And they had one category called benefit to society. And they graded everything on a D to A scale. And they said, well, mobile app developer, we give the benefit to society grade a C. And that just made me so mad because of things like this, where, you know, I think a lot of people, when they think of mobile apps, they think of games or, you know, fart apps or, you know, all these kind of little silly trivial things. But mobile doesn't have to be that way. Mobile can be impactful and effective and can help you do amazing things and help bring good and change to the world around you. So here's change on a smaller scale in the category of really cool things you can do. This is Rebecca Franks. She is an Android developer out of South Africa. And on her free time, she worked on this app for a initiative called BookDash. So has anyone here ever done a hackathon or something like that? So basically BookDash is kind of like that. So in South Africa, they have this initiative called BookDash. And what they really want to do is to get books into the hands of children. And a lot of times, depending on, I guess, the publisher, sometimes books are a little bit too expensive. So they have this initiative called BookDash where they get creative professionals together, they give them a day, and they have these creative professionals write and illustrate and create beautiful books in all of the different languages that, and I think there's like 11 different official languages of South Africa, and they produce these books and make them open licensed so that anyone can distribute them, anyone can download them, and to really get books into the hands of the children that need them so they can read and like kind of experience culture. And part of Rebecca's way of giving it to this project was to write them an app for free. And her app, basically what she is able to do is just make all of the books available for download. And on top of being a really wonderful kind of effort and a really good thing that she was able to give back to your community, there's also a lot of technical challenges as well. And how do I store the books, and how do I localize the books to the different languages? And so there's so many cool things out there that can be not just good for the people around you, but good for yourself, good challenges and good things to challenge you as an engineer and as a person. So another cool thing that you can work on, so this is like another Android developer that I know, Kelly Schuster. She lives in Colorado where I live. And sometimes making change in the world can be just for an individual. So Kelly is really cool. She used to work for Western Digital. She actually wrote firmware for embedded systems, but now she writes Android apps. And one of her kind of big passions is accessibility, making apps usable for people with disabilities. And here she is actually at one of her former jobs, and she actually did user testing with people from the Blind Institute of Technology, and kind of learning and understanding like what is it that makes applications, what is it that makes technology accessible to people with disabilities. And she's done some really amazing talks about what does it mean when something is accessible? What do people with disabilities like actually need us to do, and how easy or hard is it to make an app truly accessible, to make it available and usable by a diverse group of users. So a lot of what I talked about, doing cool things, doing wonderful things that can help the world around you or things that challenge you, again, they're kind of things that you could do with any technology and with kind of mobile in general. What is it that's special about Android? What's special about Android is the ability to reach more people, and this is something I really, really love about the platform. So at this point, I think as of the numbers for 2016, Android has 88% share of all smartphones. Now, you might say to yourself, well, that's good business for Android, right? Yay for them, they're probably making lots of money. It's not really that. The reason they have as much market share as they do is it because of the way the Android is structured, because there's hundreds of manufacturers producing devices for this open system, they're able to produce devices that are at all price ranges. So it's not just high-end, flagship, expensive phones, but it's cheaper, more affordable phones. And the average iPhone price across the globe is actually 2.7 times that of the average Android device. And in fact, in places like India, 97% of smartphone users have Androids. And that's because of that price difference. In places like emerging markets, where people where the minimum wage is very low, or where the cost of where there's a lot of poverty, you can't spend hundreds of dollars on a phone, and as well in places where the data is too expensive, you have to save everything you can. It's like people are trying to cross that digital divide. People are trying to get access to technology, but they have to do it in a way that they can afford. And so I think that's a big reason why Android has kind of spread out over the world and why it has 8% market share, because of the wide range of devices, and because that people can get affordable things, affordable devices rather, that is spread so far. And that's, in a way, what makes Android incredibly special. And this reach, this ability to have users, not just in kind of rich, affluent areas that can afford amazing smartphones, but everywhere, it is amazing because it allows you to kind of reach a wider user base, but it also gives you a huge responsibility. And that's something I think I really like as an Android developer, is that having this great reach gives me a great responsibility to create effective, useful experiences for my user. And that responsibility, that need to kind of make good engineering decisions, to make efficient code, to write things that run well on all kinds of devices, it's not just an engineering challenge. It's not just a challenge to me to write the best code that I can, but it's a challenge to me to be able to reach and create products for all of my users. And it infuses every single design and development decision that you make. And it's a real thing that the more efficient, the the more like efficient you can write your apps, so you can make your code, it affects people, like, you know, in other parts of the world. It saves them data and money, and it allows them to kind of access things that they might not be able to access before. And in a very real way, it makes you a better engineer. It makes you think a little bit differently, and it makes you kind of like do things a little more efficiently and a little bit better. So I work at Trello, and if you don't know what Trello is, it's a project management service. And basically what we do is we allow you to kind of organize your projects using boards. This is a board, and with cards. So you can use cards for different tasks or information, things like that. Now, a big feature that we wanted to make at Trello was offline mode. And we wanted to make it so that people could access their projects offline when they didn't have data connection. So a lot of people in our office are from New York, so whenever they're in like the metro, they lose connection, they can't work. And just in general, if you're using a project management app, you want to be able to manage your projects. And so we've been working for quite a long time, about a couple years, maybe a year and a half, on this offline system. And there's a lot of different thinking about what is going to make our offline mode work. So basically, the start idea is this. Like, we want people to be able to access their data offline. So the simple situation to that, or simple solution to that, rather, is, okay, we'll just download all their data. They'll have it, so even if they don't have connection, they'll have the data. But we can't actually do that. Because some people might have tons of data. We allow actually image attachments and other things. So depending on how you use our product, that might not be viable. And it's not just like an inconvenience to someone who has to spend like 5 minutes downloading data. Brazil, for instance, is one of our biggest user bases. And in Brazil, data is actually incredibly expensive. This chart from Jana shows that in terms of just the hours that a person working minimum wage in Brazil has to work to pay for just 500 megabytes of data, that's 13 hours. Okay? And it's unacceptable for you to write an application that just eats up all this data, especially considering how expensive it is. And we had to think about this. The easy solution is just download all the data, but in order to respect our users, in order to create a good experience for them, we had to kind of rethink things. We had to be a little bit smarter. And so when we thought about offline mode, we thought, well, how can we maximize the utility of offline? How can we maximize the amount of data and kind of benefit that they'll get from offline while still minimizing the drain on the battery and on the data? And it was very simple, straightforward thinking, like, okay, well, what if we just allow them to download, kind of priority boards, things that they access frequently or things that they kind of favorite? What if we also try to be smarter about how we download? What if we try to determine which data is stale versus which data is up to date and only downloads those things that are stale? And again, even things like batching network requests, kind of minimizing as much overhead as we can by doing as much as we can at once. And all those things, they're not quite as straightforward and not as easy as just downloading everything. But with some careful thought and some careful code, we were able to do that and greatly or significantly decrease the amount of data that we were using. And of course, along with that goes testing and metrics and making sure that what we thought we were doing actually had the effect that we hoped for, and we did. And we released offline mode very recently, and the data looks great. So again, in that situation, it's always about thinking about your user, and I think that's something that Android is very good about doing for you as a developer and as an engineer. Getting you to think very carefully about certain things, because you can have users with, kind of not as, I guess, intense phones with less memory and less powerful CPUs, or maybe you have users that are in places with spotty connection or expensive data. It makes you think about things differently. It makes you think about how to be the most efficient with the way that you're designing your user interface and even just your infrastructure within your app itself. So I actually ended up asking a lot of Android developers what they loved about Android in the course of this talk. And I talked to Gonzalo Silva. He actually works for Todoist. They are based in Santiago, Chile, but they have an office in Porto. And I've been using Todoist for about 10 years. It's just a to-do list app, but it's one of my favorite apps in the world. And I was really excited to talk to Gonzalo and asked him, what is it that you love about Android? And he said, the number one reason I like working in Android is because I feel like I'm building for the entire world. Not a niche, not a segment, but everyone. And I think that's something that's really special about working with Android. It's something that kind of keeps me coming back to it and makes it feel like it's making me a better engineer. So that's kind of like thinking about Android and development in kind of broad, user-centric ways about how to make things better for other people. How about we be a little selfish and think about what can working in mobile do for us? How can mobile help us express ourselves? How can it help us kind of reach those kind of like technical challenges and kind of passions that we have? So one thing that came up a lot when I was asking different developers I know, what do you love about Android, was this idea that you can create something, you can code something, and you actually hold it in your hand. And I think for a lot of my career when I was working as a developer, sometimes the product of your programming seems a little bit kind of ethereal. It doesn't actually exist, you know? Like sometimes you're writing like web service code and it kind of just lives off somewhere in the cloud. Or, you know, you write a web app and it's kind of sitting on a desktop, but there's something very special about writing apps for a phone and taking that with you. And especially in this mobile day and age when our phones are just kind of like basically part of our own bodies, you know, it's something really special when you can make something and it becomes more tangible because it lives in this like, you know, little device that goes around with you. This is Liane Mamitsuka. She works for Twitter and she actually works on Periscope, that little app that allows you to do live streaming. And she had a great way of kind of expressing this. She said that, so when she first joined, her first Android job, before she got into Android, she did server code. So she wrote services that were consumed by other clients. And she got offered the chance to do Android. And then when she thought about it, she said that it really appealed to her because she wanted to be able to have more of a connection with the product that she was making and building. And that for her, doing a client app made it feel more tangible. You could hold it in your hand and you can kind of have a more direct connection with the user of your application. And similarly, this is Bruno Ibar. He's a student. He's currently living in Lima, Peru. I met him while he was, I think, studying abroad in London, and I met him at a conference. And he basically said the same thing. He said very simply that what he loved most about Android and mobile development is the fact that you can see your code running right on your phone. You know, a lot of times when you're kind of writing code, you're waiting for it to compile, and you know it takes a while, or you know, it's just something. It's like there's like a sense of instant gratification that you code something and it's right there. It's right there for you to use and for you to see. It's just really fun. So, when I think in the last 10 years, as you know, everyone's gotten a smartphone. Every relative I have has a smartphone. I feel like I've heard this more than a couple times, like, gosh, there's an app for everything. And I really like that statement because for me, it means that you can build an app for anything. Whatever your idea, whatever your passion, whatever thing you want to do, you can write an app for it. The sky's the limit, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes that idea turns into something really cool. So this is Movie. It's kind of like an app for being able to find showtimes and buy tickets for Lusomundo in Mozambique. And it was written by Dario Mungoy. He is an Android developer who works in Mozambique. And it's kind of funny. Movie started for him as kind of a pet project. So all it was that he wanted to be able to show movies and showtimes for Lusomundo locations in Mozambique. And after he got that working, it actually evolved into a ticket sales app. So he's actually, you know, making a business out of this. And at first, you know, he did ticket sales for Lusomundo Cinema, but then he started branching out to other events. And now with kind of his partner, he's actually built an entire company on top of this. And I think that's just another really great thing about mobile, is that you can start out with a pet project, a side project. It doesn't, you know, it's just something you do for fun. And then it gets to a point where you're actually, you know, like making a living off of it and making, you know, like, you know, starting businesses and doing amazing things and realizing, you know, maybe some dream that you had that you didn't think of when you first started just like, you know, opening up your IDE and just starting on this app. Oh, here's Bruno again. So again, like I think because with mobile development, it's so easy for you to get to that final product. It's so easy for you to see the effect of what you do. It's so easy for you to just like start up an app and do something cool that you can just have like an idea or just have an inkling of something that isn't quite right or could be a little bit better, and you can just do it. So Bruno, I said, is a student, and it's kind of hard to see, but that is the app for his university. It does like scheduling and grades, and it actually doesn't quite load. I wish he had given me a bigger picture, but it's basically these little tiny little labels. You can't read anything. You can't really do anything. And he said to himself, well, this kind of sucks. What can I do to make it better? And on his free time, Bruno did this. And it's a nice, much more usable, has got a full calendar. You can actually read it. It's beautifully animated. And he just did this on his free time as a student. And I think, again, that's just so powerful about mobile. Just taking a little bit of time and having an idea and having like a passion to do something, and you can come up with something that is not just cool for you, but like that other people can make use of as well. So I think in general, Android can, mobile development in Android in particular can really help you express your passions, whatever they may be. And I think that's another thing that I absolutely love about mobile development, is that there's this intersection between a lot of different things. There are intersections between software engineering and hardware and UI and UX and security and testing, and all these different kind of facets of development all kind of come together in mobile development. So this is my friend Florina Muznescu. She is also an Android developer. She is Romanian, but she works in Berlin. And when I asked her what she liked about Android, she said, what I like about mobile in general, Android in particular, is that it's so broad. There are so many areas that you can be specialized in, and if you're curious, you'll never get bored. And I think that is completely correct. Mobile keeps you very busy. Like I said, there are so many different facets to doing mobile, and depending on what your interest is, depending on what kind of apps you want to write, there is so much for you to do. And if you're a hardware person, if you're like an electrical engineering student and you want to do hardware things, you can do that. If you're really into like abstractions and software design and like data structures, you can do that. If you're into HCIL and UIUX, you can do that. So, architecture. If you do Android development, you'll find very quickly that we love talking about architecture. We love talking about patterns and different ways of organizing and architecting apps. And we have all these discussions about how does this pattern, maximize the maintainability of my code, the stability, like how testable is this architecture? And we love talking about how to make all these pieces fit together in very high level ways. We love talking about abstractions and making everything work together. We love building our little software architecture castles in the cloud. And you can do that. If that is what you love, then you can do that in Android. Florina actually is specialized. She does a lot with architecture. And in fact, she actually got tapped to work on the Android Architecture Blueprints project. So because architecture is such a huge, subject of discussion for us, there's actually a few people at Google who have started this GitHub repository where they just have samples. They just have it's just a to-do app, and then they implement it using different strategies, different patterns, to kind of explore how effective and in what situations you might want to do different things. And Florina actually, because she's so excited by architecture, and because she had done so much good work in it, she actually got tapped to do that. So you can do some really interesting things. There we go. All right, hardware. If you're a hardware person, there's things in Android that you can definitely do. Very recently, they released the Android Things SDK, and Android Things actually allows you to build constrained connected devices for the Internet of Things, for IoT, using an Android-based operating system. And you can do really cool things with peripheral I/O, with using actuators and sensors. You can manipulate and read information, all that, to create your constrained devices. There's plenty of opportunity for you to use different APIs like low-energy Bluetooth, peer-to-peer Wi-Fi, and tons of other things. I used to work, do a little bit of stuff with camera apps, and it's really amazing. There are so many levels of understanding with how the Android talks to the individual hardware implementations of the camera and everything else. There's a very deep world if you want to go into hardware that you can with Android. And again, Android Things is kind of like the big hotness, the new thing with hardware on Android. And again, it's building your own constrained connected devices. So UI/UX, this is one of my favorite subjects in Android. And there is so much that you can do if you love building user interfaces, if you love exploring user experience in Android. And even if you're an engineer like me, I wanted to be a designer, but I'm not. But As an engineer, you have so much ability to influence and participate in the building of beautiful user experiences in UI. In Android, we have this thing called material design. So for many, many years, the big joke was that Android is kind of ugly, doesn't have great design. And through the last 10 years, through, I guess, just trial and error, through building different patterns of user interaction and kind of improving on the design and the structure that we have, Google has introduced this design language, this design theory called material design. So now there's like a big discussion open now between developers and designers and product people where you can discuss what does it mean to do things in an Android way. What is Android design? How can you, what are the patterns? How do we as Android developers talk to the users? And there's just a lot of really great work you can do when implementing beautiful interfaces. I love doing UI, I love doing UX. And as an engineer, I'm able to kind of do interface and do user experience, but from an engineering perspective. So a lot of times when you're doing UI and UX in Android, it's not just figuring out like how the user will flow through the app and how they navigate through the app. It's also being able to engineer things, being able to take pieces of the Android framework, break them apart, and put them back together to do really cool and interesting and amazing things. And a lot of that is just making custom-made views. And you know, the interesting thing about the way that we talk about Android design now with material design is they're guidelines, right? They're patterns that we use. They're kind of modes of communication that we have with the user. But there's always room to break those rules and do something interesting. There's always room to kind of break things apart and make them your own and do something different. And I think that's another thing that is great about Android is that a lot of the patterns, a lot of the way that users interact with Android were developed by Android developers, not by Google, but by people trying different things and doing interesting things, and that become so popular and that are so effective that Google kind of sucks them up and puts them in the guidelines. And this is just what material design looks like again. It's just, if you're ever interested, we now have design theory behind Android. We're ugly no longer, at least we shouldn't be. Okay, other things that are great to work on with mobile, image processing, Snapchat. And you know, it's kind of funny, Snapchat filters are amazing, but there's so much engineering that goes behind these silly little apps and these silly little experiences. I mean, if you think about a Snapchat filter, there's so much computer vision and image processing that goes into that. You know, when the camera input comes in, Snapchat is making a three-dimensional, you know, like is taking your face and creating like that wireframe in three-dimensional space, and then using that to manipulate and add in all those like funny effects and horns and rainbows coming out, and doing the image processing on that, kind of like, you know, live in real time. And there's so much computing power and so much like, you know, actual processing that goes up behind it, and also engineering. Like, how do we make this image processing system work so that it doesn't slow down the UI or crash the phone, and so that it is fun and an interesting experience? And again, like UIUX, it comes into it too. These kind of fancy and amazing things that you can do with image processing still come back to basics like engineering and user interface and user experience, and how do we make these intricate image kind of like algorithms into beautiful, fun, goofy experiences. There's a lot that you can do these days with machine learning. You know, Google is, I guess, kind of a big name in machine learning. And they've actually, in recent years, made a lot of their deep learning research and deep learning software available. There's this new API called TensorFlow, which is kind of like this open software that uses the second generation of their big brain kind of deep learning. And it allows you, within your app, to build these like learning graphs and to do interesting things. And what's really interesting from an engineering perspective is that, again, when you think about machine learning and these kind of like building of these like graphs and models, it sounds really intense, right? It sounds really memory intensive and CPU intensive, but they've actually released these APIs that are geared towards doing mobile experiences that are meant to be kind of reduced code footprints, and that are meant to kind of be lean enough that you can actually do things on a phone. And so that you can maybe make something that's like similar to the Google Translate instant translation, where you hold the camera up to a sign in a foreign language and it translates it for you. And those APIs are open source and available to you. So there's so many things that you can do now. There's so many options. There's so many applications for you to explore within Android. So another thing that I love most of the time, sometimes I hate it, but I love most of the time, is that working in mobile challenges you. There's some very specific things that can pop up during your day when you're a mobile developer that can be frustrating, but in the end that you learn so much, and that you learn how to kind of coordinate between different thought processes and different kind of like, I guess, priorities when you're building an application. If there's something that I really want you to glean from this, something that mobile will teach you more than anything else, is that you cannot get too comfortable. So I'm going to tell a teeny little bit of story first. And so something that I learned about 6 years ago, right around the time that I started Android, is that technology changes even when you wish it wouldn't. So before I did Android, I was working in this technology called Adobe Flex. So if anybody happens to remember the Flash player, Adobe Flex is this web application framework that was sitting on top of the Flash player. So you write web applications, they were actually running on the Flash engine. And that's what I did. And that was the first thing I did out of university, and I was getting really good at it. I was like doing talks and doing blogging, and I was like becoming an expert in Flex. And then along came Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs hated Flash. It was kind of like a thing for us, for the people working in Flex, that every few months Steve Jobs would say how much that Flash needs to die or something like that, and then we'd kind of laugh and say, ha, ha, ha. Around 2010, there was a big argument about whether iOS would allow Adobe to have like Flash plugins on their iOS device. And for me, I was like, well, that doesn't mean much to me. I was kind of doing different things with Flex. They were trying to move like Flex applications to be like cross-platform desktops so that you could write an app in one place and have it run on Windows and Mac and that kind of thing. So I didn't really think about it. I was like, yeah, it's just, whatever. It's just the kind of the usual things that don't affect me. I will be doing Flex apps for a long, long time. So next year, fight with Apple actually decided to say, okay, we're not going to do any more development on Flash mobile plugins. November 8th, I was like, okay, cool, that's right. All right, that's fine, doesn't affect me. 3 days later, Adobe donates Flex to the Apache Foundation. Now, that's not a bad thing, but for a lot of the people that I worked with, we worked on enterprise applications. We worked on applications for big corporations. And when Adobe donated Flex to the Apache Foundation, they basically were saying, we're not going to support this anymore. There's going to be no more official support. And I just knew that most of our kind of big company, kind of corporate clients were not going to like that, right? Usually enterprise clients like things reliable. They like a lot of support. And I remember sitting in an airport, reading this blog post and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have a job anymore. But luckily for me, I already started learning Android. And there was like about 2 hours when I was sitting in that airport where I was calm on the outside. But Adobe was basically just saying, okay, never mind, just do HTML. And on the inside, I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But in the end, I have to actually thank Steve Jobs, because I ended up going to Android, and I found a new technology. And even though I felt like I had wasted so much time, becoming an expert in something that died anyway, I think it taught me a really good lesson, and that is like, if you love technology, if you like, using technology and doing cool new things, sometimes you have to get used to the fact that your world might crumble around you. Technology is about improvements, and improvements are change. And sometimes things just change out from underneath you, but that's okay. And even if you have to learn a new technology, even if you have to move to a wholly different industry, you'll be okay. And I think in a lot of ways it makes you a better engineer. And I see these lessons every single day in Android. Technology changes, and so should you. Now, I first learned the lesson in a really big way, right? I had to get a whole new job. I had to learn a whole new set of technologies. But what I really like about Android is that it actually makes me do this day to day. It makes me do it year to year. And it does it in ways that keeps me energized. It keeps me moving, and it keeps me my mind kind of like, agile. And it teaches you that, it teaches you to be comfortable with change. Again, technology has changed. You should be comfortable with it. You should be okay with it. You should be all right that every now and again your world's going to crumble, because you will be able to build it back up. And there's a lot of different ways that, as an Android developer, you have to deal with change. Every single year, the platform changes. New features are added. Different features are taken out. Features are changed. As an example, in this last release of Android, they released a multi-window so that you can actually have 2 applications on the screen at once. And that's an amazing feature. And you might think to yourself, oh, that's cool. I might not need it for my app, or I could just plug it in. It's no problem. But features like this, it actually sometimes is not as easy as it seems. And features like this often, in a way, kind of keep you honest as an engineer. So without going into too much technical detail, this multi-window actually requires you to make layouts that are very responsive, that can adapt to different sizes. And when you're learning Android, they drill that into your head, all right? Make sure that your layouts are flexible. Make sure that, that they respond to like configuration changes and like going from portrait to landscape. And a lot of times you try, and it's not as easy as it seems. Sometimes you run into problems with that, and so sometimes you get lazy and you just say, all right, whatever, my app's going to be in portrait mode forever. You can't do that. If you want to stay ahead, if you want to build new features, you have to be honest. You have to do best practices. You have to engineer things correctly. And again, this is just one of those features, and one thing about mobile that I just love. It keeps me honest. It keeps me doing the right thing because I want to be able to do the cool new things. I want to do the new features. So another thing that kind of came up recently is permissions. So a couple versions ago, Android changed their runtime permissions, or changed their permission system. So if you remember a couple years ago, if you downloaded an Android app, you'd get a big message saying, all right, the app wants this permission, it wants your camera, it wants your contacts, it wants your phone, it might actually even ask for your wallet, maybe your passport, your ID. It would ask for this entire list of permissions. And I know I personally would hate it when I would see that. I was like, why do you need that? Like there'd be all these permissions that I didn't understand just from looking at this big laundry list of things, what they needed it for. And so in order to give the user more control, in order to give them the ability to understand what each of those permissions were for, the entire permission system was changed. So that rather than saying, all right, I need all of these things from you up front, it became more runtime. So whenever you needed something, you asked for it then. So runtime permission. So if your app needs the camera to like take a picture of you for an avatar, it doesn't ask for that permission until you actually need to take that picture. And from the surface, it's a really great change, right? It makes the user more comfortable. It gives them more control. It allows them to understand better what the heck you're doing. From a developer perspective, it's really hard. Because before, all you had to do was specify some permissions that you needed, and the user just said yes or no. Now, you actually have to understand the user experience. You have to understand the interface. You have to know that, at this point, I need to ask for this permission, and I need to do it. And then you need to figure out what happens if the user doesn't give it to you. Because before, you just installed it, and you knew that you could assume that you had these things. But now, well, what if the user doesn't let me use their camera? What do I do? And so it makes you think better. It makes you think more thoughtfully. It makes you understand the entire flow of your app and how this permission and this thing that I want affects the user and my app. So again, it seems like a pain in the butt, but it's actually a really good lesson and a way of keeping you honest, of making you even more thoughtful in your application development. Okay. All right, so design and UX. This is what Android looked like when it was first released. And like as I mentioned earlier, one of the amazing things about doing user interface and user experience is that user experiences evolve over time. And over the last 10 years, things have gotten prettier, they've gotten more streamlined, and it's because of time and building so many apps and understanding and doing testing and seeing what patterns work and which don't. And it's a process that's still going on. And even now, like when you go to those material designs, those guidelines that Android puts out for design, you'll go back 6 months later and something will be totally different. And they'll add a new component and they'll add something new for you to play with. Or they'll say, no, don't do that anymore. And it's frustrating and it's hard sometimes when you just want to get an application out the door and they keep changing things. But it's good. We're always moving toward a better user experience. And again, it challenges us to not be lazy. It challenges us to do new things and to understand and to rethink things and to make them better. And of course, there's always still room to break all the rules and try something different. Convention and best practices change. So doesn't matter, like whatever you do for development, whether you do mobile or not, there's conventions, there's libraries that you use, there's certain patterns of a certain way of structuring your code that everyone kind of accepts as how you do things. And sometimes they change. Sometimes you find out that this way of doing things is inefficient, or maybe there's some kind of improvement in the compiler or some tool that allows you to kind of be less janky with the code, and you can change what best practices are. So as an example, this happens in Android all the time. Sometimes, especially as Android is growing as a platform, sometimes the libraries that you need can come and go, and sometimes you need different ones. So this is my buddy Danny Puisla. He is a German Android developer out of Berlin, and Danny loves testing. He's talked a lot about unit testing in Android, And about 3 or 4 years ago, he gave this talk called Unit Testing with RoboElectric. So Android back in the day, you really couldn't do unit testing with it. So RoboElectric was basically a library that allowed you, that kind of facilitated your ability to do this. This year, Danny gave a different answer. He's saying to not use it. What happened? Just times changed. Testing, the new best practices. These are the things that you should be doing. These are things that you couldn't do before, but now you can. And again, like just day-to-day things, just a library, just a little bit of code you use to make your life easier, staying on top of it, and understanding when change, why you need things and when you don't need them anymore. Yeah. So really, you know, we learn what works, what doesn't. Technology doesn't have it. And so a really good example is even the language that you use might change. When you first started Android development, I think we were on like Java 6, and then we had moved on to Java 7, and now we're on Java 7, but with a couple things from Java 8. And so, you know, wanting to get the new language features and wanting to make our lives easier involves a little bit of like change and like annoyance and like being able to kind of keep up with things. There's actually, nowadays, you don't even have to write Java to do Android. There's a couple of libraries that you can use. A lot of people use Scala, a lot of people use Kotlin. And this is something that I actually did very recently. Kotlin is a language made by the JetBrains company, and it's meant to be a modern language. It's actually interoperable with Java, so you can have Kotlin and Java living side by side. And it's a much nicer language. It kind of has all these neat little features that kind of make you write less code and make code write code that's less error prone. And I was really intimidated because, you know, I had gotten really good at Java. I've been doing like Android for like 6 years. Like then my team was like, no, there's this new thing called Kotlin and we're going to use it. And then here I am like 3 months ago, like I have to learn a whole new language. Like, what is this? But at the same time, it was a good change. It's a great language. It allows you to think a little bit more higher level about certain things. And yeah, there's some weird things about it. It's not officially supported by Google, and you know, it's so early that we don't quite know what the best practices are with it. But we roll with it, and it works great. And you know, we're learning what the good things are about it and what the bad things are about it. And in a sense, we're making best practices as we go. So, in conclusion, there's always something new coming, especially in mobile. There's always going to be a new feature. There's always going to be a new language or a new tool. Everybody gets shaken up. Everybody. You know, like when something new comes down the pipe in mobile and it just shakes your world and you have to learn something new and you feel like, oh no, like I was an expert, now I'm just like, I don't know anything anymore. That's everybody. Like, it's a comforting thing. When you work in mobile, at some point every 6 months, everybody's confused. Everybody's trying to figure it out. And you're all in it together trying to figure it out. So, you know, we learn and adapt together. And instead of being afraid of it, you can kind of go forward and like make your own best practices. And in a lot of ways, I view Android as like a development kind of like platform, as a community project. We're all I said community. So community is one of my favorite things about being a developer, which is kind of weird because you tend to think of engineers as shy people who don't see other people a lot. If there's one thing that I want you to take away, and if there's anything that I'm saying that you're still listening to, and that you're going to remember, please let it be this, is that no matter what technology, no matter what industry you do, industry you enter, find a community that will support you and give you knowledge, and that you can support and give knowledge back. I wish someone had told me when I left uni how important that was. I spent years like kind of on my own, trying to figure stuff out on my own, and not connecting with other people that loved the technology I loved and loved like the challenges that I loved. And then I got to Android, and it's been amazing. And you know, all these people that I talked about, they're like some of my favorite parts of Android. You learn things from people, like meeting Kelly and learning what accessibility means, like, and you know, meeting like Florina and really understanding what all these different architectures is, and like meeting all these people and understanding their perspective. So one of the great things about mobile is that everyone comes from everywhere. One of the last gentlemen that I worked with, he was actually an art student. He went to art school and then became a Java server programmer. And so he has his particular way of looking at code. And you know, like my friend Kelly, she worked in firmware. She has her own way of working at it, and I have my way. And it's when we put all these kind of like viewpoints together and figure out and kind of make our way through this kind of mess of new features and shakeups and everything together, that is what grows us as a community. And that's what I think really kind of can give you that full fulfillment. You know, it can even be as simple as, I'm having a problem with this API. Can someone help me? And someone can help you. Or same thing, if you ran into a problem last week that was absolutely ridiculous and you were up until 4, someone might ask you the same question next week and you can help them. And by building those bridges, by kind of making that community, you make development for everybody easier. You find answers and you figure things out together. So speaking of community, you know, like they always tell you, make network connections, it'll help you find a job, that's true. Community generates technical knowledge, again, like figuring problems out. And you can get guidance and feedback from community. Like I have a lot of friends who work as independent contractors. They kind of do Android apps on their own. And they need feedback, they need advice, they need someone to bounce ideas off of. And that's what the community is for. And you know, sometimes community is great because it brings social interactions to shy people like me. Okay, so just in total, like, it's something that is very particular about the Android community. There are a lot of wonderful development communities out there, and I'm just here to tell you, I'm not the only one who thinks that the Android community is amazing. There's a lot of really particular things about it that make it a great place to be. There's this thing called Google Developer Groups. So basically, if you start a developer group, you can have it recognized by Google. And it's not like Google owns you or they run it, but it's your own independent developer group, and Google will every now and again give you support. And it's just more a way of saying, hey, Google recognizes me as like a developer group, and people can come and like hang out with us and like, you know, be part of our community. And occasionally Google will like give assistance to groups to do things like the conferences. And there are a lot of Google Developer Group, or GDGs we call them. And they're not strictly Android, they're kind of Google technology things, but Android communities are really part of GDGs and vice versa. This is a map of all the GDGs in the world. There's a lot. And it's wonderful. It just shows how big the developer community is and how, like, I guess in a lot of ways, like, and I didn't stay in iOS long enough to know much about the community, but I have been told that it's really nice that, you know, in a lot of ways, because Google is kind of supporting this, it kind of makes it easier. It kind of helps generate the community. In anticipation of this talk, I actually tried to get in contact with people from GDG Lisbon. And I have to say that there is an amazing tech community in Lisbon connected to GDG. GDG Lisbon collaborates with a ton of other groups. So there's an Android Lisbon, there's a mobile, Angular, any kind of like all the technologies that you could think of, they work together. So it's all of these communities, all of these developer groups actually work together to form a really great ecosystem of developer groups in Lisbon. And they don't just coordinate with each other, but they coordinate with different universities. And so this is one of the organizers of GDG Lisbon, and it's amazing. I asked him, okay, like, can you tell me what it is that's great about GDG? What do you love? And he just kind of just poured out to me just so much love and so much enthusiasm for the community. And it's such a valuable thing. When you have people that really want to make this connection, that really want to work with you, that are willing to say, hey, you have an idea for a talk, you have an idea for an event, it doesn't matter if you're just out of uni or if you've been working for 20 years, come and organize. We'll help you do what you want to do in the community. And that is, they do a Dev Fest, which is basically kind of like a conference every year. They do Android study jams, and they're on meetup.com. And in fact, like Felipe told me that all of the GDGs in Portugal have like kind of like this overarching, like they're so connected and so like, I guess collaborative. They actually have a GDG Portugal site. So if you're interested in all, you should definitely check it out. So it just so happens that a lot of the people I know are not just like Android developers, but that they're Lusophone Android developers. We have an amazing community in Android of Portuguese-speaking developers in Portugal and in Brazil and in Mozambique. So this is my friend Walmer, and he actually organizes GDG Sao Paulo, but he actually also helps with this Lusophone Android community. So even if you don't go to meetups, even if you don't go out there to events, you can still participate in the community via Slack, via chat channels, and they're out there for you. And again, like, you know, we're all part of a big Android community, but there's a lot of really nice, like, kind of like pocket communities as well, you know, the Spanish-speaking community, Portuguese-speaking community. So they're there for you. There's an amazing array of developers that, you know, you can talk to, that you can interact with. Again, Dario, who I mentioned before, he is working really hard in Mozambique to kind of like nurture the community there. He's actually a mentor for a lot of the African Lusophone countries, and he writes Android kind of like basic series of like a kind of a getting started in Android blog series in Portuguese, because he found that there wasn't enough resources for him, so he went out and did it. And now he's like mentoring other communities. And he said, and like he has a lot of enthusiasm for it too. Like I think once you get into it, you'll find that people who are in the community love it and are excited about it. And he said that I really love the way that the community is so vibrant. There's just so much content and resources, both like learning content and people that you can kind of like lean on and rely on to build and to succeed and build high quality apps. And of course, it doesn't have to be Lusophones. All of us in the Android community welcome you as well. It's an amazing place, and we're always talking. There's always something new, and we're always discussing things and trying to find out the next cool thing to do in Android. All right, so the Android community, it is truly global. I've met, in the years that I have participated, I've met people from almost every single continent except for Antarctica. Haven't met anybody from the South Pole quite yet. They're incredibly active, and it comes in many different forms. Meetups, conferences. You can find that in the community. The community is that Googlers, they hang out with us, they talk to us, they listen to us complain, and they take our input, and they kind of discuss things with us. They figure things out with us, and that's really, really valuable. You don't really get that in too many places. And again, there's a huge network of conferences as well as meetups, DevFest, which are sponsored by GG, and there's an entire network of conferences called DreadCons. They're all over the world. And again, online communities like Slack channels. And there's also an amazing community of people. Like we have a Spanish language. There's just so many people that are so excited. They're fast. I actually started a YouTube channel because I'm so excited about Android people, and I wanted to talk to them. So there's just so many people who are just so geeky and crazy about Android. And if you want to, you can come and love Android and be crazy with us. So I want to leave you with this. The reason I love Android so much, and I'm so happy to stand up here and look like a silly person talking about it, is that it's an amazing, vibrant community. It challenges you as engineers, as users, as people who want to build beautiful and engaging interfaces and experiences. It's rewarding. You can do amazing things. You can work on cool projects. You can affect the world. And Android is anywhere. Your users are anywhere. Your users are all over the globe. And your fellow developers, your fellow community are everywhere as well. And so I very much encourage you that if you've ever thought about mobile development, if you have any interest at all in Android, to definitely check it out. Thank you very much. I don't know how over time I am, but thank you so much, SINFO. I had a great time. Hope you did too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Huyen, for your presentation. Now, does anybody has any questions for Huyen? Anyone? No questions? Okay. So thank you so much again for being here and being part of SINFO. Everyone, let's give a big round of applause to Huyen once again. All right, so make sure you stand around for another presentation by Job van der Voort.